What's up, everybody? Welcome back. This is another video on the Psycho Diesel channel. Today we're going to be talking about heavy-duty diesel transmissions. This is one of them right here that we have put back into this truck, right? And we're going to be explaining how power is transmitted through a transmission, how it works, and hopefully you guys enjoy the video. All right, so the most important thing that I think we need to start off with when we're explaining power flow through a transmission is that not all shafts actually connect to each other, and we're going to explain what that means. Okay, so I'm going to draw a little depiction right here. So we're going to have, like, say, the input of the transmission shaft, and that's the part that actually plugs into the engine. See, so this is kind of crude drawing, but say it goes like that, and what happens is it actually goes into the engine, right? So let's go and kind of look at what I drew. So this is the front side of the transmission, right? And this is that shaft that I drew. Okay, if you look, you'll notice that there's like a shaft that seems to go through the whole thing. Okay, well, we're going to explain what exactly is entailed by that. So let's go back to our drawing. All right, so you'll see that you have this wall, and that's where the body of the transmission starts. And it seems like there's a shaft that continues to go through. But what you'll notice, as I'm explaining right here, is that this shaft is actually not connected. This shaft is plugged in and it sits on a bearing inside. And so this shaft can spin, but this shaft will not transmit that power. Okay, those are important things to understand because this happens a lot in the transmission. So just because things are spinning doesn't mean power is being transmitted. Go. Okay, so as I was saying, things might be spinning, but power is not being transmitted. So right now, if you come and look at this, and we'll get a good camera view of the transmission from the top, you'll notice these things right here. Now, this transmission right now is in neutral. So if I spin this, you'll notice that these gears are spinning, and you're saying, well, Sam, you just told me that shaft right there is not connected to this shaft and is not transmitting power. That is correct. This shaft, so I can actually expose it by moving that collar, that shaft is not moving. That shaft was not moving because these are what are called shifting collars or sliding clutches, or sliding collars, and they actually transmit the power from here to there. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you, this shaft is being spun by the engine, and that shaft terminates on this gear right here, okay? And that shaft drives the counter shafts. That's what those are called, or counter shafts that have gears on them as well. And so these are transmitting the power up to here, but up to this point, that power has been terminated. It doesn't go any farther, right? So then what we're going to do is put the transmission into first gear. Okay, now we do that by taking this sliding clutch and sliding it into the first gear. And now you'll see that the sliding clutches, even though these two are not in a gear, are moving. And over here, this shaft at the end of the transmission is actually spinning very slowly, and that's because it's in first gear, right? Okay. So what is happening with these sliding clutches is that they are spline to this shaft that's not connected to this shaft over here, right? When you spline this shaft to this gear, you have now created a path for the counter shaft power to go. So the power is going from the engine to this input shaft to this gear, splitting off into the counter shafts. And now that we have a place for the power to go, it goes in that first gear, and then it's gone out and it goes through the auxiliary, which we'll explain that later, and then into the rear, where it can be taken off to the wheels. And another really important thing to understand, just like I was talking about with how these shafts don't always transmit power between each other, that they're not always connected. Another really important thing to know is that these gears right here in the center of this shaft, like that we're showing you, these gears are not connected to that shaft. That's called the main shaft. They are not connected unless these collars in it. And I know I said that, but it's important to understand and realize that these gears are actually on bearings and that they only are directly connected to the shaft when they're splined by that collar. Okay, there we go. Okay, so as we were explaining with the first gear, I'm going to get into the auxiliary gear at the end, but we're going to explain briefly how gears work, and it's not much explaining to do, but I'm going to do a drawing for you. Okay, so something to quickly get this into your mind would be a track and a field, right? You ever gone to track and field? You all know what that is. Basically, the way it works is it obviously takes longer to go around a bigger circle than a smaller circle. So you'd have to run faster in a bigger circle to do the same speed in a smaller circle, right? So that's why they stagger the starting lines for the people who run in the track, because obviously it takes them less time to go around the inside of the circle than the outside. So then explaining the gears, basically you have underdrive gears and then you have overdrive gears. So an underdrive gear would be like this, where a small gear turns a big gear and that gear turns slower, thereby making more torque, and the vehicle goes slower. And then you have overdrive gears, which is the exact opposite, where a big gear turns a small gear and that gear turns faster and does more revolutions than per one turn of that big gear. Okay, so now we're going to go through the gears in this transmission. So now we're going to go through each gear in sequential order. So like we said, over here we got gear 1. So we put this gear, and obviously you see that shaft. Now we're in gear and we're in first gear, right? So we're spinning, everything is spinning, but now we have power being transmitted here into the counter shaft, into here, out through the auxiliary, and through the output shaft. Okay, now another important thing to know is that only one of these collars can be put in at one time. And the reason for that is say I have this one in gear, but I also put this one in gear. Well, that doesn't work, and the reason is because these are two different size gears, and so it's going to cause them to bind like this. So it's not going to spin. So obviously you have to take out the one that was in gear, put that back in the center, and then go to the next gear. And this one is second gear. And so now that shaft in the back is going to be spinning a little bit faster, less torque, more speed, but still quite a lot of torque because we're only in second gear. Then we can take this one out and we can go into the third gear, which is the one right across. So this is first, second, third. And so now we're yet even going faster in the output, but we have less torque and more speed, okay? And then we go into the fourth gear. So another thing to explain, like we said, we were talking about overdrive gears and underdrive gears, okay? So basically, we have the power going through here, splitting off, and these gears are smaller than this gear, which we call the first gear, right? And the reason is a smaller gear turning a bigger gear, underdrive, right? That's first gear, okay? Same thing here. And then we get all the way up to the fourth gear, which is over here, and now we have more of a 1-to-1 ratio where the gear that is driving and the gear that is being driven is almost exactly the same size. And so that's the fourth gear, and we can put it in like that, and now it spins in fourth gear. And then we can go into the last gear before we would be switching into auxiliary to go in higher gears. But we go into the last gear, which is fifth gear. And so we plug it into here, and now this is an overdrive gear. And you can tell because this gear is actually smaller than the driving gears. So we have input goes into here. These gears are driving that gear, and they are bigger than that gear, right? So overdrive, okay? So now the power is flowing out. Okay, so that's when we start to explain auxiliary and how that relates to the power flow of the transmission. Okay, so now we get into the auxiliary, which is the back, and that's where the power is finally transmitted out of before it goes to the other components, which eventually goes to the wheels, right? So as we explained, you can go through any one of these gears, and then you get over here, and the power is transmitted through any one of these, through the countershaft, through any one of these gears, and it's gone to the center shaft. Now we have a similar situation then up front right here as we do in the back down here. So you can zoom in on that. So it's a similar situation from here, how this shaft connects and terminates on this gear. Well, the same thing is happening over here. This shaft, which is not connected to that shaft, this shaft is actually terminating on this gear inside of the auxiliary. So you can get a view on that. All right, so you see that? That is one of our auxiliary gears. There's only two gear selections in the auxiliary. There's the high and there's the low, okay? Now obviously the low would be if you're just starting off, you're driving the truck, you're just rolling away, and you'd be in the low and you'd be in first gear, okay? Well, what happens is when you want to go into the higher gears, so like 18-speed transmissions, when they have all these gears, what they're doing is they have 5 gears here or whatever, and then you have the auxiliary, which will switch things. So you go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, switch something in here, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or whatever, okay? So that's basically what's happening. So this auxiliary, so if we come and look at this shaft terminates right here and actually turns a counter shaft over here, okay? So now we actually have these auxiliaries out right here, some other ones. and we can explain them through here. So if you come around, so like we said, keeping in mind the driven and the driving gears and the overdrive and the underdrives. In the low side, what you're going to be dealing with is an underdrive gear, where big gears are driving a small gear, right? And so that's what you see right here. This gear is slightly bigger than that gear, so that is an underdrive gear. Okay, so when you just rolling off, you'd have these gears selected, and that is what sends the power out. Now, if you have an overdrive, so now you've gone through all the gears and now you're going even faster, you want to go up to the higher gears, you switch the auxiliary and you have a gear back here. So if you pan it down, we can see this is a big gear, and over in this corner, I don't know if you can see that, that is a very small gear. I don't know if we can, yeah, I'll get, so right in here, that is the small gear driving that big gear. Okay, and so that would be the overdrive. So like we said, so this part would actually come over and plug in like that, okay? And so basically that is the power transmission in a big diesel truck.